Good morning, everybody. I'm Nance Woehler, and this is Hopkins County Innovate Caffeinate. And I'm so glad you could be here. I'm glad to be here myself. I'm so glad you could join in today. And I'm a freelance writer, and I'm a co-convener of Potluck Church here in Madisonville. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my business and the kind of my story, how we got here, and those sorts of things. And hopefully you can have some good ideas for me, which I'll appreciate, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as I can. I wanted to start out with some thank yous. First of all, I want to thank Economic Development, Madisonville, Hopkins County Economic Development. Melanie Tapp and Ray Hagerman and Ruth Ann Paget are three of my best friends. And anyway, I thank you for the opportunity to be able to do this. I'm a tenant at Kentucky Innovation Station. Typically, we're not in presence like the rest of you. We're all working from our homes too. And but anyway, I love getting to be around them, and I appreciate their support and friendship. And I want to say thanks to them. And I also want to say thanks for the Innovate and Caffeinate community. I've been part of it since we started as 1 million cups, or nearly when we started. I was invited into it pretty early on. And anyway, I've been inspired by so many of your stories, and I've learned so much. And if you've never been, gosh, I encourage you to go. Whether you're an entrepreneur or you're thinking about it, or you just got an idea, or you just want to support and learn about your community and feel more optimistic. It's a great community to be part of. We meet on the first Wednesday of every month at Kentucky Innovation Station, typically. We're doing our first Facebook Live today. I should say we're doing our first remote Facebook Live gathering today. And anyway, it's a really fantastic thing to get to be part of. And I encourage you to join us. A big part of what I want to talk about today is going to be working from home, and I'll get to that in a second. I do want to acknowledge that it is such a blessing to get to work from home right now, and of course we all don't. And I'm so thankful for the people that are working in all sorts of ways, many of which I'm still not cognizant of, that enable me to have this life. And so that was my thank you that I absolutely didn't want to forget at the beginning of this. Those of us who are still able to do our jobs, or who are able to do our jobs from home, we owe so much to those of you who cannot, that are still on the, whatever front lines you're on, or whatever behind the scenes you're on. And, I could name some specifically, but you are legion, and we are thankful for you more than ever. And actually, that was one thing I wanted to do when Karen Tapp kicks these things off. When we're all together, Karen Tapp's the leader of our coordinating group for Hopkins County Innovate and Caffeinate. She kicks things off with a question, and she gives everybody an opportunity to kind of identify themselves and what organization they're representing, if they're representing somebody else. So I invite you to do that. Please like and comment and share this post. And I invite you to in the comments, if you would, if you feel comfortable doing so, tell us, about your who you represent. And but the question I wanted to throw out to everybody to maybe share a little bit is, who have you found yourself during these last 2.5 weeks being more thankful for? Whose work are you more thankful for? And I'm not asking who are you most thankful for. My cat has just joined me. This is River. I'm not asking you who you're most thankful for, because that's a little too hard. It's a little too high of a bar. I would just say, who in the last 2.5 weeks have you felt more thankful for their work? That'd be a good question for us to all kind of share. And if you feel called, and it's a specific person, if you feel comfortable doing so, tag them in the comments. Certainly everybody needs every bit of good news as they can get right now. I'll show you kind of what my game plan is for today, so that you'll know the script that I'm kind of working from, and to just give you kind of some expectations. I'm hoping to wrap this up in about 15 or 20 minutes. So I want to talk about my business. Actually, my business is called HubCore, which sounds like a giant business. It's just me. But anyway, I'll kind of talk about it and what it does, what I do, I should say. What it's speaking in the third person like that, when I slip into that, it really speaks to my ego. Then I want to talk about the working from home, which I've done for more than 20 years now. And then I'll get into, again, kind of my main thing that I do. My main service is writing. And I'll try to pass along a few tips that I've learned along the way, which are not complicated, but they may be helpful for you. So anyway, I'll try to spend about 5 minutes on each of those three pieces and talk those through. And I'll apologize in advance for being derelict if I am about responding to, I know the Facebook Live, the people who are really skilled at it are able to kind of like in sync answer questions as they go. And that's not me. So I will be happy to respond after the fact. And whether you're watching this real time or later, please weigh in with your comments, because I'll probably respond to them, asynchronously later. So that should be fine. Oh, and I should ask you again, if I didn't already, please share. And I'm going to go ahead and try to be swift and do that myself, and share it on my own page. So here we go. Okay, I think I did it. All right, terrific. And thanks again for joining. So my name again is Eric Nance Woehler, and I'm a freelance writer. That's how I make my living, is as a freelance writer. I'll get us started with a little piece I wrote. This I started on October 14, 2002, and I may have finished it yesterday. I was intimidated by eggs early in my bachelor career. Shell and the yolk, yuck, pain to clean up. This I see was an irrational fear. Tug the shell apart. Don't crush with thumbs. And then wipe the skillet ASAP. Being afraid of breakfast is dumb. Now, you may be shocked after that reading to learn that poetry is not my primary revenue stream as a freelance writer. I do write poetry. I write all kinds of things, like almost everyone does to some degree. I write all kinds of things. And I do enjoy poetry and writing it. I kept a journal pretty much my entire life. All sorts of things. But anyway, what I primarily make my living from is I write about technology and business. And I'm not a technical writer. There are people that write manuals about how to use technology, and that's not me. I tend to write what would fall under the categories of public relations or marketing materials for largely technology organizations or companies, and then other kinds of businesses or business organizations. So that might be a press release, it might be website copy, other kinds of marketing material like brochures, that sort of thing. One of the things I do that's kind of different that sometimes people are a little bit surprised about is I do a lot of ghostwriting for engineers. And what that means is that an engineer will have an opportunity to put an article in whether it's the mainstream media or business press, business publications, or some blog or some kind of niche technical publication. They'll have an engineer will have the opportunity to present some kind of article for one of those things. And so what'll happen is I will get on the phone with that person, with that engineer, and I'll hear her or his ideas and their concepts that they want to convey, and get them to talk me through it as much as they possibly can, so I can hear their words and they can get through I am not an engineer. I don't have that training, but they can get through my thick skull what they're hoping to convey, and then I will turn around and try to write a draft in their words, and then pass it back and forth with them until we have something that does what they want it to do, and that they feel comfortable with how it sounds, and it's their piece. It's their ideas. It's usually their words. I'm just trying to get those into some kind of document within the parameters of whatever the publication wants. Number of words, tone, those sorts of things. I'm kind of the guardian for that in that process. A lot of times when I'm telling the story at this point, people say, oh yeah, that's because engineers, they aren't good writers. And that's not been my experience. Almost every engineer that I've worked with, they could absolutely do the work of producing the draft and doing the writing. But writing is a challenge for anyone, including someone who's been doing it for a living for more than 20 years. To get through that barrier of getting some kind of draft down on paper is difficult for everyone. And that process, which is often quite long, takes a long time. It's more cost effective for that engineer to pass that job off to me, and they can continue to spend their cycles on actual engineering and making things for our good. And so that's a big piece of what I do to make a living. I actually started, I started out, I wanted to be a newspaper writer. I worked at my high school paper at Heath High School in West Paducah, Kentucky. And then I worked at the College Heights Herald at Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, and was certain that that's what I wanted to do. I went to work for newspapers in the old Evansville Press, and then I worked at the Bowling Green Daily News, Henderson Gleaner a little bit, Owensboro Messenger Inquirer a little bit, and enjoyed being around those newsrooms. These are some of the people that I'm cognizant of that are working right now and outside their homes, and I'm so thankful for their work right now. They're doing such important work, and I'm thankful for every one of them. I think I get the Messenger every day, and I love it. But I realized pretty quickly after I got out of college and started doing it full time that really was not my calling. It's not what I was supposed to be doing. I think largely just because of my temperament. But it wasn't, and I also I probably wasn't a skeptical enough brain for that job, which is required. And so anyway, I kind of drifted into some other things. And I was always doing other types of writing too, more creative writing and those sorts of things. And so I had ideas of different books I wanted to write, books about Kentucky. I love Kentucky. Different books I wanted to write and that sort of thing. And so I was doing freelance. I drifted into freelance, and I moved to Washington, D.C., which was a great experience to get to live there. And so in addition to my freelancing, I was also needing to make a more consistent living. And I started temping through an agency, which placed me at a company called Newbridge Networks, which has subsequently been acquired, and it's part of a big company called Alcatel now. But I went to work at this place called Newbridge Networks that made equipment for telecommunications. And I was placed as a typist. One of the things you learn when you're working as a sports writer in Kentucky is you learn on Saturday nights to type really, really fast, because what you're doing, at least at that time in the early 90s, you're holding a phone. A phone handset thing in what is that called? You know what I'm talking about. But the old phones that have the cord, landline, the old landline thing against your shoulder, and tucking that in, and then you're typing as a coach or some student reads you off the basketball scores, the kid's name, who scored them, and the number of points, and you better get that right. You better get that right. So you got to be a pretty accurate typist, and you got to get them in, because you got all these high schools calling in. And so anyway, I got to where I could type really quickly, and that is that was and is, I'm sure, quite a valued skill through a temp agency. And so I started working for this company called Newbridge Networks, and that developed into a full-time job. And I didn't know what they did. I didn't understand what I was typing about initially at all. I had no connection with it, and but I learned. And this was in the 90s, and it was as the internet was kind of, our whole digital culture was just really being born at that point. I mean, the actual core technologies drift back further, but as a popular phenomenon that has changed everyday life for us, regular people, it was really kind of just taking off in the 90s. And so out of that, people were leaving that company and starting their own companies. They'd have some particular idea and they'd build a whole company around those. And in the course of that time, a person comes to work at Newbridge, and her name is Vivian Kelly. And we became friends. She was in the public relations department. Well, eventually, all that is to say that a couple of years later, she becomes my boss at Newbridge, but then she also goes and then she leaves and launches her own communications company called Interpros. Her doing that, I was still doing freelance on the side, moonlighting, but with total understanding of the employer that they knew it was going on and they were fine with it. But that allowed me to start my own independent company because anyway, she would pass work to me. And so I had a client right from the start when I started my business. And with a friend who continues to be my client and absolutely one of my best friends in the world 23 years later. And I'm so thankful for that. And anyway, beyond thankful. So anyway, that's kind of what. So then subsequently that's what I developed into, and that becomes my business. Wonder how I'm doing on time. Oh yeah, it's about 5 minutes. Okay, that's good. All right, so that's what I wanted to say about that. This whole time since I started that, this whole time I've been working from home. You know, home being different things. Sometimes I was living with friends. Now I live in Madisonville. I've lived in different places across the country, but in any event, I've always worked from homes or, you know, whatever that looks like at the given moment. And what I do want to say about working from home is that what we are experiencing, what so many of us are experiencing in the last 2.5 weeks, that has not been my experience of what working from home is for the 20 plus years leading up until now. This is a different animal. We are, this isn't a particularly new thought. Obviously, we are all dealing with a stress and a problem that is we don't even understand the ramifications of how it's changing us. It's at this point, it's all undefinable about how it's changing us, and it's changing our home lives. It's changing the way we work, but all of our relationships are affected by it, and all those sorts of things. Our physical health is changing. Even those of us who are fortunate enough to not have contracted the virus yet, or to have contracted the virus, please God. It's changing all of us. And so I do want to encourage you, if this is your first experience, if these last 2.5 weeks is your first experience with working from home or having your employees working from home, don't judge this model based on this little prototype, because this is an anomaly. There are some similarities. There are a zillion things being written right now and circulated on YouTube and all the various media about how to work from home and different tips. And I've watched a lot of that stuff or read a lot of that stuff, and frankly, it's all pretty much correct. I mean, almost everything I've read in the last couple weeks or consumed in the last couple weeks, I thought, well, it took me 23 years to kind of glean that information, or however many years it's been. I think it's 23. I should have actually looked that up before I started this today. It's everything I'm reading, the tips and that sort of thing kind of jibe with my experience. And I thought, gosh, it took me 23 years to learn it, and people have gathered this in the last 2.5 weeks. I'm going to go through two of my colleagues, Laurie Davis and Rebecca Butler, for the Interpros Voice, which is the blog for this company Interpros, for which I'm a content creator. But anyway, two of my colleagues wrote a blog And I'll just go through the high level. I'll post a link to this in the comments of this post. And so I thought this was excellent. But at the highest level, their tips are have a plan, to use tools to do planning, and know what you're doing each day and how you're going to manage your day in terms of home stuff, and if you have children, parenting stuff, and all that kind of stuff. In addition to work, figure out the whole day each day. Totally agree with that. Create a separate workspace. I largely agree with that, although I'm in my living room right now, and that one I don't always adhere to. That one's I think it's good. Set working hours, establish firm working hours, take regular breaks, communicate and collaborate, pay special attention to that. Take advantage of the flexibility such as it is right now, but there is flexibility with working from home even in this environment, and own it, and use it and make yourself healthier with it. And this one I probably have never specifically thought about. Plan your meals and snacks, and certainly that's something I need to be better about. And I thought it was a good thing for them to bring up. But anyway, like I said, that's the highest level take on this blog post, and I'll share that. And thank you, Laurie and Rebecca, for writing it. But I'll share that link in the comments that you can take a more in-depth look. There's some other great stuff out there. Vivian, who I mentioned earlier, she was on a Twitter chat yesterday. Golly, that's ridiculous. I'm not that unfamiliar with these platforms, but I stumbled on that. Anyway, she was on one yesterday and had just a lot of neat stuff that I hadn't thought about because I don't manage employees. She does, and she had some really great insights, and the other people who took part in that had some really great insights about that. Again, I'll post a link to that in the blog. The one she pointed out, in terms of tools, there's plenty of reviews of that kind of stuff. ZDNet had a really good evaluation of different types of tools that help with working from home. And again, I'll post a link to that as well in the comments. So those are three things that I'll kind of follow up with and that you can check out. I got to thinking about, like, what do I have to add and to the kind of stuff that I'm already seeing that's out there. And the only thing that I maybe have not seen, and I'm not even sure that I feel totally, I understand this is a probably pretty limited value, and you'll have to, take it, accept it with your risk. I think that there's a difference when you're working from home in how you conduct intra-office communications in terms of handling projects. I think that as opposed to being in an office where, which really lends itself in a shared physical real-time presence, where you can kind of talk things into the ether, and as a group of people come to a decision that way, where you're face-to-face. I do think that you have to be a little more conscious of not just throwing out open-ended questions in emails or texts or however, Slack or whatever platform you use to do intra-office communications on, like, how to attack a project. I think that you have to be a little bit more like what I like to do. I'll give you a specific thing. Most of my intra-office is done just through email, and I always do try to say toward the end. And by the way, I'm never a boss of a project. I'm always working for other people. So I will try to get to the point of my next action of what I can do to move this project along. And I try to close with that. Here's what I'm going to do, and here's when I plan to do it. And please let me know if you're wanting me to do something different. And I try not to just leave an open-ended question. What do you think if I did this? You have to, there are certainly times that I have to do that where I feel less sure of what is probably needing to be done. But I try to be a little bit more aggressive in the remote environment in terms of saying, here's what I'm planning to do by this time. Please tell me to stop if you want me to. But I found that to be effective. It kind of keeps a forward motion to projects by doing that. So that would be the only thing that I kind of have to add to anything that you could do, any other tips that you could find by just a simple Google search of work from home tips, of which there are plenty from the last, many weeks. Okay. Writing tips specifically. I am running a little longer than what I had. So anyway, thank you for sticking with me, to those who have stuck this long. But I'll wrap this up fairly quickly now. Writing tips. We all have to do some writing, and it's becoming, and in the remote environment, we're all writers, correct? I mean, we all have to be able to communicate with the written word, either by text or something, even invitations to Zoom calls or what have you. You got to be able to be clear. Just a few things, and take these with a grain of salt, but some really stuff that I've picked up along the way. Get something down on the screen or on paper. Just get it going. Don't overthink it. Start in your head before you start typing, or start with your pencil. Get something going. I can't tell you how many things I have started, and I'm not kidding about this, with the words blah blah blah, 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 BLAH. Just breaking that wall of the blankness and getting something bad that then you can make better. That's a huge hump, and I really encourage that. When in doubt, once you're starting to get something together, when in doubt, go simpler with your words. That doesn't, go simpler and go shorter, by and large. I've read some pretty short 2,500 word pieces and some pretty long 100 word pieces. If you're taking too long to say, anyway, say it in as few and as simple words as possible. And that's a sliding scale on what it is. If it's something really, this is a neat trick that actually a paralegal passed on to me one time. If you're writing something, this takes a long time, but if you're writing something that takes you've got to really make sure it's accurate. You don't want typos in it. An external piece. Proof it backwards. After you've written it through, start at the last word of the thing and start looking at each word in reverse order. And when you do that, you will catch spelling errors, transposition, letter transposition, that sort of thing, that you wouldn't by reading it across just normally, because we've all done those Facebook tricks where the letters are all jumbled and sometimes you can still read what the message says. That's what your brain's doing all the time. So if you read it backwards, you break that pattern, and you'll actually catch typographical errors that you wouldn't otherwise. That's been quite an effective thing. If you get something written and it's just, golly, it's just thick. It's not getting there. Save your document, rename it as something else, and trust me on this, almost to the word, cut off the top third. Cut off the top third and see how it reads if you start where your original second third begins, of whatever it is, of however many words you're talking about. Maybe this is just my own tendency, but I tend to say about the first third of whatever I'm saying, you could completely sleepwalk through it, because I'm just kind of like stammering and getting my thoughts together. I'm sure my friends out there would know this would be the case, and know that you can do this a lot more than the first third. But anyway, when you're writing something, if you'll cut off the top third, if it just feels thick and clumsy and those sorts of things, try that and see what happens. See if you start it there at wherever that second third starts, see if that doesn't give it a little more action and punch. Another little trick, got to thank Mr. Ozenbaugh, a writing teacher and newspaper teacher that I had at Western, and this one has stuck with me. To give your writing more punch, check your verbs specifically. If you're wanting to give it more oomph, stay away from the adjectives and adverbs. What you're wanting to do is reevaluate, just go through each sentence and look at what the verbs are. You can usually change, you can put more description and more clarity by making the verbs correct of exactly what you're trying to explain, and it gives it more punch without adding weight to the whole document. And the other thing, when it comes to, this isn't, when you're writing artistic stuff like even fun, unsophisticated artistic stuff like my little eggs poem at the beginning, you try to write from your heart and what you feel. It's all about that. And I find it's best to try to be unconcerned about what other people may take away from it. Instead, you just kind of put it out there and try to hope that readers or consumers will do something else with it, and they add their own feelings to it. When you're writing advocacy stuff like I do, where you're trying to I try to write everything with a call to action in mind, and all throughout the document. My first question when I get on these calls with whomever is, before we even started talking about the topic, what do you hope the reader or the consumer of this piece does or believes differently as having consumed it? And if I get that, if the source provider, the content expert, subject matter expert, and I get in alignment on that, that can come through the entire piece, and it really helps. It helps tell you what you're not wanting to talk about as much as it does what you are wanting to talk about, and it just makes it clears the whole process quite quickly. And so I would encourage you that if you're doing something, I'm not talking about art, I'm talking about business pieces, or I do a lot of writing for churches, those sorts of things. Think about what you want the reader to do, what you hope that they do as a result of having consumed it. So there you go. A lot of people say that, I don't know, I guess some people say, I might not have actually ever heard someone say this now that I think about it, having said that. But you'll hear people, anyway, there's this thought that writing is something that can't be taught. That's certainly not my experience. I have been taught and continue to be taught over and over again by a number of individuals and a number of resources. A friend of mine, a fellow named Len Hoppus, he commented on a post I had yesterday previewing this Facebook Live, and he was one of the first people. I remember him sitting down with me and showing me how to rewrite a preview of a volleyball tournament at Western when I was a freshman and he was a sophomore at Western in 1986. And he was gentle but firm, and just absolutely sat me down and showed me this is a better way to do this. And I'm still thankful to that to this day. And there have been a zillion of those people along the path. And I also find that you can learn about writing from books. And I've thought of 5 real easily right off the bat, and I could find 3 of them in my home before this call. First one is the big dictionary. I've got a giant one, the American Heritage Dictionary. I use it quite frequently. It's fun. It's necessary. I use the Associated Press style book quite a bit, and I use the actual hard copy. I get it updated. I think actually this is the most up-to-date, but it's 2019. I'm usually writing for publications that adhere primarily to the AP style book, and so a lot of times what I'm doing is taking people that are more in Chicago Manual and those sorts of things, but getting them into AP style. There's not huge differences. It's not that hard. But anyway, I have one of those. 3 books in addition to that. The 2 that I don't have with me that I couldn't find. Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott is a fantastic book. She's a beautiful writer. Spoiler alert. I'm not even going to spoil it. You should. That's a beautiful book and a great book about kind of the process of writing. Similar to that, about more of a process, is a book. I've never read a Stephen King book other than this one, but I think it's called On Writing, and about the way that he goes about writing. It also is a beautiful book. And then one of the ones that I wanted to mention, Kentuckian Tom T. Hall from Olive Hill, Kentucky, the singer-songwriter. He wrote something called the Songwriters Handbook, and I found it plenty applicable to the kinds of work that I do for a living, which are far from country western songs, but he has a lot of great stuff in that. I'm going to read you just a little piece of that. Again, this is Tom T. Hall. Some days when you're sitting with your guitar or at your piano, life can feel pretty grim. Words won't come. Your melodies are all like something else you've heard, and music rattles through your brain like a train over an old bridge. If you're a real writer, these things will not discourage you. In fact, the trials of a writer in distress often benefit those who find a real wingding of a song rolling off the mental presses at a later time. Only by knowing how difficult it can be at times can a writer experience the joy of having a song born in the air around his head. I have seen writers roll out of their self-imposed exile of a week or two with a smile as wide as a watermelon slice, yelling, "I've written a song that weighs 10 pounds. What's it about? It's about this old boy and this old girl." And then you smile and say to yourself, "Ah, yes, the good ones always are." Rainy days for writers are the ones when no one wants to listen to your songs. They also are the days when you don't want to listen to your songs either. On days when you don't like your own songs, by examining your thoughts, you will find you don't like other people's songs either. Some days music doesn't do anything for you. You'll have to get used to having those days. That's I don't know how applicable that is to your world, but that's I think about that little piece quite a bit. So anyway, I'm thankful that, writing is something, what I do for a living is something that you can actually learn to do and get a little quicker at it, and maybe a little bit better. And anyway, I'm thankful for all those teachers. So that's the bulk of what I was hoping to talk with you about. I would ask again that you like and comment and share this, and please come to Hopkins County Innovate and Caffeinate. This is a wonderful town. We are so thankful to get to live here. It has great, the EDC and others through the town are so supportive of the local entrepreneur community and small business, local business community. And I love being part of that and love learning about what other people are doing and supporting them. I said at the outset that I mentioned that I'm a co-convener of Potluck Church, and then I didn't talk about that at all. My freelance writing is what I do for a living. My number one job is that I am the spouse of a minister. My wife Rachel, whom many of you know, she is the transitional minister for the west area of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in Kentucky. So there's 41 churches in western Kentucky, and she works with the ministers of those churches and coordinates activities. She is also she also launched a church in Madisonville called Potluck Church several years ago. We had our 250th worship last night. Anyway, that is my main job. I do a lot of writing for church stuff too, and then of course also we have a child and being a parent. And I say all that. I just wanted to get to. I wanted to mention Browning Springs and the people that I'm thankful for. Our daughter is a sixth grader at Browning Springs, and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. We've been talking. I hope you've all been talking in comments about people whose work you're more thankful for. I was thankful for Browning Springs is a great school, and I was thankful for them. Thankful for Mr. Clark and all the teachers before, but I'm amazed at what you all are doing right now, and thank you very much for your work. Okay, I'm going to read you two more things. Two more Kentucky authors. There's a poet from Louisville, Kentucky named Muhammad Ali, and here was a poem that he wrote. It's my favorite. Me, we. And love that poem. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was, well, I'll be darned. The last thing I wanted to talk about was a little less, I think that poem really represents what we're all learning now, is that this experience that we're all having is such a revelation of the interconnectedness of us all. And anyway, I want to keep that truth in mind moving forward. And but the other quote, this is more of just a quote from a book by an author from Hopkinsville named Bell Hooks. And she wrote, heightened awareness often gives the illusion that a problem is lessening. This is most often not the case. It may mean simply that a problem has become so widespread it can no longer remain hidden or be ignored. And so it's kind of a crispy feeling, not warm and fuzzy. It's a pretty crispy feeling. But again, theme being, my theme for this today, really thinking about all the people that we all have, those of us who have the blessing of getting to work from home, to be thankful for. Anyway, I want to keep that in mind, because those of us who are not on the front lines right now of keeping everybody functioning during this time, our moment, I do believe, is coming, where we are going to be called to serve in our own ways, based on our unique gifts and talents and environments. And while our main job right now may be to kind of like follow the rules and stay inside and those sorts of things, I do believe that our moment is coming. And the people that are on the front lines right now, they already are, and they are going to be more tired. And we have to be ready. We have to be ready to the problems of the things where we have seen the inequalities and the problems that are more kind of like chronic, that are being exposed by this tragedy. We are all going to be called to invest ourselves in the work of ironing those out, and it may be months and months away before we're actually able to start that work. So anyway, I think that Bell Hooks quote is something I need to live with, and let it sit on my heart. And anyway, okay, that's it. I hope you like and share this post. Thank you for the chance to get to talk with you today. And 45 minutes. I ran a little longer than what I was expecting. Thanks for sticking around. And yeah, okay, that's it. I hope you have a great day.